Hey folks, thanks so much for the kind words trying to walk you through getting head rotation and no floating heads and full body animation set up for MetaHuman Animator. I now want you to completely forget that last video if you've seen it. And if you haven't seen it, don't feel any need to go watch it now. I've learned a few things since last night when I was making that in the wee hours of the morning. And I would now like to make the definitive here's how to get the different animation stuff that you want right now in MetaHuman Animator version 2.0. I guess this is all technically MetaHuman 2.0. So here we go. What I want to cover is, first of all, setting things up properly. So making sure you have MetaHumans in 5.2. Then I'm going to say, okay, if all you need is a bust, just a head that's doing rotating stuff, and that's all you want, here's how we'll do that. Then I'll say, okay, what if you want the head and you want it to be attached to the body, but you're using, something else for the head rotation? Here's how you do that. And then the most complicated, still more convoluted than I would like, workflow that I've tested 6 ways through Sunday will be the what if you want to use the head rotation from your MetaHuman Animator capture and then pair that with everything from the neck down being a body animation. So those kind of 3 approaches, we're going to cover all that. Here we go. So step 1, make sure that you are using MetaHumans from 5.2. I realized that in all the previous videos I have made so far, I've been taking MetaHumans that were actually made for 5.0 that I migrated over to 5.2. In fact, you can even see in my part 1 getting started with MetaHuman Animator video, the part where I'm literally just copying my MetaHumans folder over, and those are all 5.0 MetaHumans. So a lot of the problems that I've been having, and I'm sure some other people as well, has been entirely due to the fact that my MetaHumans are not properly upgraded for 5.2. So first thing you want to do is when you have MetaHuman Animator open, you're going to notice that you've got a whole set of legacy MetaHumans, this whole tab over here. And what you want to do is basically upgrade any of these ones that you want to be able to live in 5.2 by clicking on any of them and just clicking on upgrade selected to active version. You could do upgrade all if you're crazy like that. I am literally just going to say upgrade selected to active version, and it will say that it'll take a little bit of time, but this is way easier than the bridge method. If you try to look in bridge for your MetaHumans that are still in 5.0 and upgrade them there by trying to import a 5.2 MetaHuman, it's actually going to require you to have downloaded versions of the 5.0 and 5.2 ones. So while that's fine, if you really, 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 really need to upgrade an old MetaHuman, I want to start with the more common use case, which will be just getting 5.2 working. And so if anyone has a real desire to say, hey, I've got an old project and I want to get that working properly in MetaHuman Animator, I will make a separate video on that, but let's cover the more common use cases here today. So if you've got everything set up in current version 5.2, I've got a few tests going on here. Most of these don't have thumbnails. Not entirely sure why. These 2 both came from Mesh to MetaHuman. This one was made directly in MetaHuman Creator. Actually, this is from my MetaHuman DNA and my best attempt to try to get something that looks kind of like me in here, though there are a few things that just can't quite match my actual face. Anyway, I've got these 3. They're all ready to go. They will show up in Bridge. So let's go take a look at that. Oh, yes. And here's just the result of the test of me just making sure everything is behaving the way I wanted it to behave. So we've got an attached head that is rotating and stays attached to the body, even with body animation. So that's where we'll end up by the end of today's class. Look at those fingers. That's cool. Nice little glow there. I have no idea what's going on, but it's kind of fun. All right, so let's get started by first opening up Bridge. And in Bridge, if you are all signed in and you are absolutely in a 5.2 project, which is easy to mess up, especially if you're starting from the MetaHuman lighting presets because they are made for 5.0, you are going to open up Bridge, which, by the way, is over here, Quixel Bridge. And then you have MetaHuman presets. These are all fine. These are all upgraded to 5.2. They're ready to go. I grabbed Zen and imported Zen over. Notice they all say MetaHuman 2.0.0, and that's all fun. And if you, why did I close that? And if you go to my MetaHumans, you will see the ones that are ready to go. So there's my 2 guys there. I could start generating and downloading this guy if I wanted to, now that he's been properly upgraded. and this one is downloaded and this one is downloaded, and they can both be imported into my project, no problem, which is great. Down here at the bottom, we see legacy MetaHumans. And so these are all a bunch of ones. I like that they're grayed out. It's just a good reminder of like, hey, you're going to have some problems if you try to import this into your project. The control rig, the skeletal mesh, a whole bunch of stuff isn't quite going to be doing what you want it to do. So just bear that in mind. And then once you've got everything imported, we're going to start from just a blank map here and kind of walk through all the steps that I just have. So we're going to start with just like, hey, I want some floating heads and I just want them to do a fun little animation. Okay, so that'll be the easiest version. And now that I know how control rig is supposed to be working in this, it actually is much easier than what I was encountering before. So what we can do is we can go into our performances folder. Sorry, mine has become a bit of a mess. And we've got our setup here. That is going through everything. And you'll notice this too, that before, when I had anything besides the default skeletal mesh in here, it wasn't actually giving me any rotation. And that was because it was older MetaHumans. So if I were to go to something like this guy in my previous project, we wouldn't see any of that head rotation data because the control rig was actually missing all that. I wasted way too much time today trying to manually add a bunch of the control rig data stuff to the new one, thinking like, why didn't they just add this in the upgrade? And turns out they did add it in the upgrade, and I just didn't realize I was using an older version of 5.2. But you can see all the head rotation stuff happening there. And so if we just want a bust, that is just going to be up here, exactly what we've seen here. That is very, very straightforward. Doesn't matter what we have in here. None of that's going to matter. One thing you might want to keep in mind when you're exporting is down in pose offset. By default, it is set to a rotation of 90. I've zeroed it out just so that if I start to bring in other MetaHumans, everything is facing the same way. So just keep that in mind. But I can go to export animation, and I will just have a new folder here, and I'm just going to call this test 01. And I'll make sure I'm doing this just as anim so I know where it came from. And now you still do want to make sure that if you plan on getting this animation over to a few different skeletal meshes, that you do the face archetype skeleton that is in MetaHumans common/face, and not this one, because even though they are pretty much identical, they are still not going to perfectly match out of the box. So you'll see a little bit more of that happening. So make sure you're grabbing face archetype skeleton in MetaHumans common face and doing create. And then we can open that up and confirm, yes, we do indeed have all the head rotation working in here, which I was not getting when I tried to export this way using one of the older MetaHumans that were not properly upgraded. So there's that. And then I can also do export level sequence. I'll put that in my sequences folder. I'll just call that test 01. And these should both pretty much give you out of the box exactly what you're after. So notice if I open the sequence, for example, that we get this, right? And this is all rotating.
Work next door, even though we started.
Right. And what we can actually do here is if we're like, okay, I just want a few different busts in here, what I could actually do is take the skeletal mesh asset and change that to anything else that I would want to be using here. And we can see that it goes right over to the head and everything is working fine. So that's great. Okay, but of course we're missing everything that comes with the MetaHuman blueprint. We don't have face or eyebrows or anything like that. So what we can also do is we could actually bring in a MetaHuman. I'll grab one right over here, Zen, for example, drag them right into the sequence. And so this will be a lot like what I had set up previously. What is going on with the eyes there? And so if you just want busts and you're not trying to pay attention to the body at all, easiest thing to do is just open up your MetaHuman, grab everything except the face, and just go to visibility and turn off the visibility. So you'll just literally have the face and everything attached to the head. Delightful. Okay, and there's that. And what we can try doing here is a couple things. One would be we could literally go ahead and copy the entire face control board control rig over to Zen's face. So I could do Control V, and that would come in right here, and I could delete the other one here, and we would now have these match.
Upper work
So that's
next
cool,
door.
right?
Even though we started at the very same time, Alexander Hamilton.
And that's all doing its thing. And now we've got the hair, and that's great. And we could duplicate and do a few of these. That would all be fine. We can also do this with the animation we exported first. So let's just drag in or we'll just delete or mute. We'll just mute. The first Zen, we'll bring in another Zen. Same idea right there. But now we're actually going to try deleting the control rig for both of them. We don't care about the body at all. We could even delete the body if we wanted to. And then in face, we're going to find the one we just did called test 01 anim, that one right there. Okay, and then this one we'll just drag to the front. And for all intents and purposes, this should be identical to the one we have in the control rig. So that's all great. That all looks good. Okay, so that's number one. If all you want is some floating heads that are doing some head rotation, then great. That is all you need to do. If for any reason you want to delete the head rotation, that's actually relatively straightforward. You'd actually want to start over in the control rig, and you would go down here and down at the bottom. We could just change that switch to be 0 right there. And there we have lost the animation there. And if you wanted to now have an animation that does that, we could either export this by going to face and bake animation sequence. And we could just call it, face, or I know I'm going to get my naming all silly here, but in animations test 01, no head rot for head rotation. And that would be fine. All the defaults are totally fine there. Or alternatively, back when I was in my takes, I could actually just uncheck the box that had anything to do with head rotation. So we can see that over in performances. And we've got this guy here. Whoop, nope, sorry, that's just the animation. Although that one, because it was the old MetaHuman, I mean, that's the other thing you can do if you don't want any head rotation, is just use an old MetaHuman, because none of it's actually going to export anyway. But no, don't do that. That's too much work. So over for a head movement mode, we could just do disabled right there. So we could just disable it entirely. And by the way, I don't think you really ever would want to use transform track, because it's just going to be so hard to get that to work with anything else if you decide later that you want to have a full body. So I would just stick with control rig or disabled, and note control rig, it says enables that head control switch in the control rig to be able to toggle it on and off manually. But if you know you want an animation with no head rotation, then you could just say disabled and export animation, and back in here, no head rot from performance thing, whatever this window is called. Yeah, real good, Alex. And we'll do save. And that is all fine. And notice that it already has disabled enable head movement. So I could do it here or I could do it there. I just need to make sure when I'm actually exporting that it's unchecked. And I can do create, and that would be fine. And you see, we got no head rotation there. And just confirming, we probably almost definitely have the same results from this one as well. Yeah, these should be functionally identical. So no head rotation. Okay. So I hope that's useful for step one. If you just want a bunch of floating heads like the little animation I did, and you want the head rotation on or off, we're pretty much done. I hope that was helpful, and goodbye. Next up, I want to look at what if you want to have the face expression animation, but no head rotation. So like Mr. Baldy over here, we want to make sure that in this case, we want the body to connect properly to the head, but we are not trying to tie that head animation to anything else. So the way we would do that is we'd start by just making sure we've got some kind of body animation in our project. And the simplest way to do that would be to go to add, feature or content pack, third person. So we'll just get some simple Manny animations here. And don't forget Quinn. We have now Quinn is the female mannequin inside here. I keep wondering if Quinn is actually supposed to be like a play on words the way Manny is a play on for mannequin. If anyone knows, let me know. I'm genuinely curious. And for this, let's just go ahead and create a new sequence. We'll just see what it's like to start from scratch here. Although actually, before we do the new sequence, let's go ahead and retarget the animations we have to be able to work with the MetaHumans. So we're going to go into characters, mannequins. Don't go into the UE4 one, animations, and let's hop into Manny here. And we can just take all these animations. I think we can even do, no, we can't do the blend space, but we can do all of these and right click and do retarget animation assets, duplicate and retarget. And basically the MetaHuman and the mannequin skeletons are almost identical, a lot like the MetaHuman identity face versus a regular MetaHuman face, but we do have to do some light retargeting here. So we can just find Manny, and then we're going to open up any of our bodies. Usually I'll just type the word preview, and any of these bodies should suffice. Doesn't matter if they're male or female. And I'm going to say retarget, and we should now be able to have all those animations working with a MetaHuman. So let's test that hypothesis out. We're going to go ahead and create a new level sequence, and we'll call this still head moving body. Very poetic. And let's just go ahead and drag our character into our new sequencer. What I quite like about having everything set to spawnable inside of my sequencer is it's very easy then to, say, go into different lighting maps, or even just render out with different lighting maps without having to think about what's actually in the level, because we're going to keep everything spawnable. Do notice when we drag our proper 5.2 MetaHuman in, we do see the head IK control stuff down here, which was not present before in the 5.0 version, plus a bunch of little nuanced facial animation stuff. So there's a lot of reasons to make sure that you are doing this properly. We're not going to be using the control rig. We're just going to use our baked animation, so we can go ahead and delete both of those. And we obviously have nothing happening yet. Let's start with getting the face in. We can also give ourselves a little more screen real estate by closing all these. And I'm going to press G just so I can see the face a little bit better. And I'm going to start with adding in one of our no rotation things. No rot. Right. And so remember that this one we exported directly from the control rig that was inside the level sequence we had. And then this one is exported directly from the performance window for MetaHuman Animator. I forget what it's actually called, but where we had our take opened and then exported a direct animation. So these should be functionally identical. Although that's interesting to note that this one is 191 megabytes and this one is only 18. Probably because when you're exporting from control rig, if you aren't reducing your keys, you're going to get a lot more information. So that's actually good to note. I could probably go in and reduce this quite a bit. So I'll use the smaller one. 18 megabytes seems totally reasonable. And you might find that when you bring this in, you're not going to see anything appear. If that does happen, just close your sequencer, open it up again, try save all. If none of that works, just restart your whole engine. It seems to be a little bit of a weird bug right now, and I think it's only coming up for me right away because I was testing a lot of this stuff before recording. So we've got our animation. That all looks fine. Let's go to our body, add in our idle animation that came from our third-person character, and we see this all seems to be okay. All right, so this out of the box seemed to work fine for me. I've got the head attached. Let's also try something with like a little bit more movement, maybe something like running. Right. There we go. And that seems fine. But I do want to mention that if you have any problems with the head staying attached, there are a couple things you can try. I've encountered this before all the way back in 4.27, and thanks to JS Films for reminding me in his recent video how to solve this with the disable post-process blueprint. So first thing you would want to try is under the body itself. You'd actually want to go under details, and you would want to do a keyframe for both either custom mode or animation blueprint, and then disable post-process blueprint, little checkbox there. And that might make a difference for you. In this case, it's just locking everything in one place for me. And then down for the face, you might also want to go ahead and do a keyframe for disable post-process blueprint. And if I do that, we'll see that we've totally broken everything. But once again, just try giving a little save all and try exiting out and going back in. And we can see that now, this is all working. So this didn't actually change anything for me because it was working before I did all this. But if you do have a detached head or anything like that, you can go right ahead and set these up yourself as well. Okay, so I hope that's good. We've got so far floaty, busty heads that are just kind of rotating and talking over in our sequence over here. And then we've got an animation that has the head only playing back facial animation, while the head movement itself and all of that is controlled by a body animation. And now we're going to do the most complicated one, which is actually taking our head rotation data and combining that properly with a body animation. And so I'll start by just describing what you would think would work here, and then I'll show you that it doesn't work, and then I'll show you what does work. So you can skip ahead if you're not interested in seeing what doesn't work, but I do think it's kind of interesting, and I hope it gets fixed. So let's start with a totally new, well, actually, you know what? We can start from this. We don't have to build all this from scratch. Let's go into our face here. And instead of a no head rotation one, let's go ahead and find something that does have head rotation. So I believe we've got one called test01 anim. And this one, if we open this up, this one does have all the head rotation data. We can scroll down and see it all there. Our head, pitch, roll, yaw, translation, and the head control switch. And so you would think that just by bringing this in, that we would start to get the head rotation data in. Nope, nothing. So you see the head is still locked and still using the same data from running. Versus if I were to disable the body, watch this. I'm going to mute that. Oh, and I also need to turn off the animation blueprint, or turn off disabling the animation blueprint. So there we go, that's disabled. And now we can see the head actually rotating, right? Okay, so this is all doing its thing. It's rotating around, but it's not attached to the body, okay? And so you would think that it would be pretty straightforward to do something where you disable the post-process blueprint and you just have everything working. But nope, we're actually losing the head rotation data here. So a couple things we're gonna have to do to make this work. The first one is we're actually gonna have to change the face animation blueprint a little bit. So we'll go ahead and open that up directly. And in that face animation blueprint, over in the anim graph, we're going to want to go over to where we have this layered blend per bone. This is a node where typically you'll be combining animations and you'll be saying, hey, I want everything from the right clavicle down to use my punching animation, but I want everything else to stay with what it is. Don't worry about anything else for the moment. But all we're going to do is, instead of a standard branch filter here, we're actually going to use what's called a blend mask. So I'll copy and paste this just to have an extra one sitting around in case I want to go back to how this is set up currently. But this is going to be set up specifically to grab our head rotation data. So instead of a branch filter here, I'm going to use what's called a blend mask. We don't have a blend mask in here right now, so we'll have to create one. It's pretty straightforward to do. We're going to go and open up our skeleton in the upper right, and we are going to find our head, which is right there. And we're going to do a blend profile and add a blend mask, and I will call this head mask. And then all I need to do is, for head, I just need to set that to 1. So this is essentially going to do what I described with the branch filter. We're going to take everything with the head, just the rotation data, and grab that. Everything from below the head will stick with the body data. So now over here in our layered blend per bone with blend mask, make sure you actually select your head mask and then compile. If you get an error, you probably just forgot to select that. So I'll go ahead and do a save all. Okay, so now you would think that this would all be working. And in fact, if I go ahead and disable my post-process blueprint, we now have something that is kind of working, but not quite. And this is the thing that really puzzles me. Like, I would think that this would be perfect, but it's like slightly off. What we actually need to do is we need to export our animation in a very particular way that is going to look exactly the same as the one we have here, our little test animation with all the head rotation data. But for some reason, we need to do it directly from the control rig. So the way that this is going to work is we'll go back to the original sequence we exported, which we called a test01 sequence, and we've got everything in here. So we specifically are going to need to make an animation from the level sequence that has all the control rig data. The animations that we get directly from the MetaHuman Animator take system will not work for what we're trying to do now, combining the head rotation with body animation. I have no idea why. But basically, if we go over into the sequence that we've already made and we take anything here that has the head rotation data, this should work if we export it to an actual animation. And it's important to note that if you actually do the original MetaHuman archetype face skeleton thing that has all the blend shapey stuff, then that is actually going to need to be retargeted. But if you actually do the retargeting in here, like we did by just swapping the mesh over, then we'll actually be able to use the animation directly. That might have been a little bit confusing. So let me actually do that briefly from scratch, just so that you understand fully what I'm talking about. So once again, we'll open up our take. just always using the same one for consistency. And what we're going to do is make sure we've enabled our head movement as control rig, not transform track. And there we go with control rig. We're going to go to export level sequence. And this one we will call 4 parts. We're just scrapping this and grabbing what we need. So create all that. We'll open this up. So what we have here, if I were to just export this directly, if I were to go down to the control rig and export this, oops, sorry, I got to go one up to face. And if I do bake animation sequence, I'm going to show you that this one won't work. So I'll just put in animations and I'm just going to say does not work because this one would actually need to be retargeted. It's, again, one of these things where this skeleton is slightly different from the MetaHuman skeleton. But what's interesting is while it's still in this raw keyframe control board form, we can actually do the retargeting right here. So I can actually take that face just like we did at the beginning of this and go to the actual skeletal mesh and pick anything that is based on the other MetaHumans I have. Any of these would be fine. So there's my mesh to MetaHuman character. And now that I've actually gotten it to retarget directly here in the sequencer, I'm actually okay to directly export this one. So I'll do bake animation sequence, content animations, and I'll say head rotation working from control rig. And I'm noting that because I now know after lots of practice that this is the only way that we'll be able to combine the head rotation with the body. So again, all the defaults are fine. I'll export that. And now let's just go back and before we just edit the still head moving body sequence, I'd like to draw some contrast between the 3 we've made. So let's just duplicate this and call it moving head underscore moving body. Open that up. And now we just want to go ahead and change the head we have here, or the head animation, to be the one we just made. And also remember, I had one that was called like won't work or something like that, like does not work. It's not going to show up because it actually isn't targeted to this. But this one we know is from here, head rotation working from control rig. This one, for some reason, again, functionally, it looks exactly the same in terms of animation and all the data we have here to the one that we export directly from the MetaHuman take browser area, the performance window. But for some reason, this one will work. And so we'll see actually that if we go ahead and we disable that post-process blueprint, it's a little hard to tell because of all the running animation. So let's go ahead and change this back to something like idle or my jump loop. We'll be able to see that the head is in fact rotating and everything is staying attached. And we've got the fun little glowing hands. And this is all working. So make sure that for this, you do have disable post-process checked in keyframe, because if you don't, you'll have the original head rotation and it won't be behaving correctly. But here, it should all work. Very strange, but that's it. Body, head rotation, everything working together. And I hope that is extremely helpful to you. Now, just to put a little icing on this cake, let's say you don't want just the head to rotate. You want to get all that neck movement as well, because right now it's literally just the head that's rotating. Well, that'd actually be pretty straightforward to do. We could go back into the face blueprint right here, and we could actually create a different blend mask that is going to be maybe from the neck or even the spine if we wanted to be so adventurous. We just want to make sure it doesn't mess up everything else. So let's just go maybe down one level. We'll open up our blend masks, and this one will be called maybe neck mask. So we just know it's a little bit further down. And essentially, we're just going to find where the head is. And we just want to be like one further down. Maybe we'll go to neck one. That might be okay. Let's see what happens if we go into face anim BP and just now use our neck mask. So we'll compile, save all, and there we go. A little hard to tell, but now we just have more movement happening from the neck and not just the head. So anyways, I hope this slightly long video is going to be helpful for covering all your needs with face and body and not detaching the head and all that good stuff with MetaHuman Animator. Thanks so much, everyone. See you next time.